Hey, this is Madeline Sklar.
And Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio. Amazon AMP has finally announced that they will be shuttering the app and they will be closing it down, and it will be no more. This was Amazon's play at social audio, right? And it seemed to have a great deal going for it in that they were going to allow creators to access the Amazon Music library, and they were kind of presenting it as a bit of a play towards creating your own radio show, right? And I don't know, it never really seemed to pick up. It was certainly out there in beta and people were invited. You had to have a code, you have to have an invite. And it never kind of really got beyond that in terms of being rolled out for public access, really. They didn't shout about it very much. I mean, it seemed very difficult to access. And I was kind of thinking a little bit over the weekend about the similarities between Spotify Live and Amazon AMP, and how both of them are plays for social audio from really big companies that haven't actually amounted to anything. We lost Spotify Live already a few months ago. Now Amazon AMP will close at the end of the month. And both of them kind of had a very similar play going for them. You had all of this music. You should have been able to play all the Spotify catalogue they made available to you. You had all the Amazon Music stuff. For anyone in broadcasting, radio, podcasting, we all know what a hassle it is to be able to use the songs that people know and love because of licensing and copyright and all of that legal stuff around it. So these apps and these features within social audio seem to give people that kind of access to content that really we hadn't been able to use legally before. So surely it should have had everything going for it. But no, sadly not. Amazon AMP will close at the end of the month. As I say, I put together a thread earlier because I was trying to kind of gather my thoughts around why Spotify and Amazon might not have been able to make this play for social audio work. Michael and Morgan, thank you so much for joining me, stepping into those shoes of Madeline's while she's not here. That broader question of why Spotify and Amazon couldn't make it work, what would be your response?
Michael, I think you should go first because being over in the UK, my take on AMP is slightly limited by the fact that it was still restricted to the US. So I've looked at screenshots, I've kept up to date with my US friends who were using it, I've read their release materials. But the rest is secondhand, so maybe you have first-hand knowledge.
Fair enough. Yeah, so I guess some thoughts that are swirling in my head about this is that Amazon, this was one of their very rare plays into creating a bit of a creator economy, for lack of a better term. I mean, you can, as an Amazon influencer, you can submit product videos and people can watch them, and some people go live on Amazon and so on. And other than that, this was about it. And when it came onto the market, what was really remarkable about AMP is how similar it was to another app that's been around for a while called Stationhead. It basically was emulating exactly the same functionality and all the same things you could do, except it was using Amazon's music library instead of either Spotify or Apple Music that people had to be subscribed to be able to use Stationhead. So I don't know, I guess AMP was coming into a market that was already kind of being filled by another app that was doing fairly well on its own. And then it just didn't seem like they wanted to put much behind it as far as promoting it and really making it a big thing. It was, I don't know, maybe it was an experiment, but it didn't pan out for them. So I guess I'll leave it there for now.
Morgan, you've obviously had quite a lot to say on the various points that I had put out there. What, as you say, we didn't really get our hands on it over here, right? And even trying to listen to it was difficult. I mean, I did so via VPN a few times, but finding out what was on there was very difficult. And that's one of the things that I've put in the thread. Like, in the end, if nobody knows what they're looking for or where to find it, how is this thing ever going to happen? And as you've said in one of your responses, surely that's key across the board with all of this social audio stuff and with podcasting as well, with any of this kind of content. Why is everyone finding it so difficult to crack that, do you think?
Right, yeah, that's one of the deep rooted problems for live in any situation. So, I mean, with I'd probably want to say down the line some more like things about the company, the positioning, community management, Amazon as a whole, all sorts of things like that. But if you just focus on this general problem for social audio, which is when you have something that's live, to be able to recommend to people so that when you open the app, you have a good experience, you need a couple of things in place that are actually very hard to get in place. One is on the supply side. So you need an awful lot of live conversations so that you can, when somebody opens the app, have a good chance of, from that variety, being able to find something that you could recommend to them. A second one there is you've got to work out what on earth that conversation is while it's live. And of course, conversations are long, open-ended, wonderfully winding things, much different from, say, a short video clip. The other side is the demand side. So most of what we consume is on demand. And to make the time or to be at the place where you think, okay, I'm going to set aside this open-ended time. Maybe it's scheduled, that's slightly different. But that constrains just how many people you might be able to reach. So you have a demand constraint and a supply constraint from the very beginning. And when you're doing that, you then have to, in real time live, work out of who on the demand side you can match to things on the supply side. And all of that is actually incredibly difficult. We might feel that it's difficult because we'll hold up a company like TikTok as having this remarkable ability to recommend us on demand stuff, videos that are asynchronous, right? But when they insert lives into that, very rarely, I think, you swipe up and you see a live and you think, oh, this is a fantastic recommendation. And if TikTok struggle with that, everybody else is going to have real problems.
One of the other points that I'd mentioned was monetization and how any creators on any of these social audio apps seem to be driven there by the thought of how they might sponsor their content, monetize their content in some way. And without that kind of direct access to doing so on either of those platforms, potentially that was a reason why people didn't necessarily explore it further. Do you think that might be another point for kind of users and creators?
Yeah, I think there are a number of aspects to this. So Amazon were really positioning this. Well, firstly, I have to say that Amazon tried to keep their brand out of it. It was, for all intents and purposes, AMP. And we knew it was Amazon, but most people didn't, I think. So I'll just say, when I say Amazon, I really mean AMP here. But they positioned it as a kind of creator platform as part of the creator economy, as Michael said. And when you do that, one of the things that is now kind of table stakes is expected is a form for these creators to monetize. And Amazon, of course, introduced their creator fund. This is a move that we've seen often in social audio. We saw it a lot in 2021. Clubhouse did it. Spaces had the Spark program. Facebook tried to pay creators. This was, a thing to do. But I think this is actually in hindsight, quite a questionable thing to do early on when you're building a product, because effectively you're paying to acquire users and you don't really know why those users are sticking around or are there. Whereas what you want to do early on is get a real feel for whether your product is resonating with users, whether people are there and enjoying it for the product itself. So that's one of the reasons why I think that this is probably not a great idea. The other one is a matter of community. I think Clubhouse people would recognize this, and Spaces people also would, that when you're selecting a smaller group of creators and you're paying them in the early stages to produce for your platform, you have a lot of other people who are there creating, and they feel slightly, hard done by. They feel like they too should be looked after in some sense. And it can be, for a product that is often group-based, it can create division in a community. And I think that community aspect is often not thought about well when companies are approaching this as a creator platform and are thinking about creator programs. So I don't know, a lot more to say there, but does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think also they tried to draw on fan-based communities, didn't they, by drawing in celebrities and well-known names. So, I mean, Amazon AMP, pretty much the only name I've ever seen linked with AMP is Nicki Minaj, and clearly her radio show is, they've had lots of fans and posts and things on X about, where are we going to listen to Nicki Minaj now? So she obviously drew in a lot of people, but I think that was maybe one of their ways of trying to draw ready-made communities via music fans over to discover what was there and find out more kind of about it. Michael, what did you want to say?
Well, my thoughts, you used the word radio show, which I think is really, really important to bring up here, because if any platform was really going to have a chance to create something that was really great for creators to monetize, it was AMP and even Stationhead, because so many people have had the dream of running their own radio show, like being the DJ, and they play the music, they spin the tracks, and so AMP and Stationhead even gave people the ability to do this, and AMP couldn't capitalize on it to make it a business that they could sustain. Stationhead keeps going. You can give tips to people over there. I'm not exactly sure how the monetization works, but there is stuff built into that over there. So I gotta say, we've got to think of these platforms as a little bit different from like Clubhouse and X Spaces and so on, because it really was designed from the beginning to be a creator platform, not so much community building or friendship building. And it's still, AMP has not gone anywhere and they're closing it down. So I think that's interesting.
Yes, definitely. No, somebody asked me, they said, look, surely radio is still a thing. It has a wide user base. What is going to be the digital version of that? There must be a route to that. And it seems that Amazon, thing I appreciated by the attempt for AMP is just how narrowly focused it was, that it wasn't trying to be all things to all people. It wasn't like, oh, you can do talking, but you can also do shows, and also we have this music aspect. It was, look, you turn up and you play your records, and maybe you do a bit of talking in between, and that's really it. That music focus, and specifically the radio positioning, I thought set it up for, okay, maybe this is interesting, this could work. So we're still left with the question of why that didn't work, and whether there still is a way to get something that looks like radio in a more interactive digital form.
Yeah, and you're totally right about drawing on all those people that are wannabe radio stars, right? Why do you think I've got a roadcaster in front of me? I mean, I worked at a radio station for many years, and the minute I came away from it, I was like, how can I try and emulate that feeling and be involved in that kind of content again? Yeah, so there's...
Exactly, Suze. And the thing is, like, you've been doing this. You have experience in this, and you can run a great space here and a podcast and so on. And maybe people are realizing that to really be a good DJ and run a proper musical radio show, it takes a lot more than just showing up and playing music, and so maybe that plays a factor in it as well.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think sometimes you think, oh, it's just audio. I've not got to sort out the backdrop. I've not got to think about the video of it. I'm not thinking about filters and lighting and all of that kind of thing. But actually, when all you have got to rely on is the audio and what comes out of your mouth to engage people, and all you've got is their ears and their minds to, that's you're working within the theatre of the mind, right? You've got to say things that keep people listening and keep people interested in what's going on. That is a skill. And yeah, maybe it's not just as easy as plugging in the microphone and off you go. A big thank you to our sponsors, Zealous.
I love Zealous. This has been one of the coolest tools that we've come across, and so we just had to make them a sponsor. If you're like us and you're doing spaces, maybe even podcasts, this tool makes it so easy to repurpose the content. So you can use it like audiograms. Suze, I love how you keep creating these awesome audiograms after our space ends, and it's such a great way to keep the conversation going, take little snippets and put it out there.
We've wanted to create audiograms for all the different episodes that we've done over the last 2 years, and it just takes up more time. But Zealous has made it really straightforward. And actually this week, my new thing that I checked out with them is their new AI tools. So actually what they're testing out, it's in beta over there at the moment, but you can ask it to suggest where chapter headings should go within your audio, and also to create things like show notes and blog posts from the transcript of your audio, which it can create for you, all of which is super useful.
Yeah, go check it out at allthingsaudiopodcast.com/zealous. They have a free trial. Highly recommend it. We both did the free trial, Susan and I, and we fell in love with it.
I guess once staff get cut from these projects, it is always writing on the wall, really, unless someone, unless it's making them loads of money or it's really drawing them into a direction that the company appears to be going in. I guess the writing was on the wall for them, but it is sad to see it go.
Right, yeah, and that's some of the broader thing. If we're not thinking about the product itself or social audio in general or something like that, the other thing is what we have is these large companies who have deep pockets, who I think on the back of the pandemic were looking for a thing that could open up new markets for them, and they had the money to put into it. So, but these things were never core to their business. And when times got tough, so there was a big crunch in funding. I mean, Amazon is obviously doing pretty well in general, but Alexa business, which I think this was hooked up to, has been struggling for years. They've lost billions of dollars. And if a product is not showing traction fairly early for them, when the cost cutters come round, these things are just obvious targets. So I think that's another thing, that social audio is actually much more vulnerable because many of the companies that tried to do it in the last few years, it was always treated as a feature and not a product, which is a shame here because Amazon and Spotify launched these as separate products, not features. So there's depending on which way you want to go on that. But just the thought that they didn't have enough time to show traction, and these companies were not invested in them enough to work out how to get product market fit. And then they were cut.
Which makes you think it really was that knee-jerk reaction to where they could see the hype during the pandemic, and almost like a desperation to get involved in the thing where all the people were all of a sudden. I mean, I guess, when lockdowns started and that, no one had any idea how long all of that might go on for. So even if they had a glimmer of doing something with audio or something like social audio in the future, seeing everybody flock to Clubhouse and people start to speak on spaces here on Twitter on an established platform, potentially that, they haven't thought it through in business terms. It is literally one of those, this is where everybody is and it's the zeitgeist moment. We've got to jump on this bandwagon and push out what we haven't completely thought through yet. I don't know. Do companies really do that? I don't know. I've never been in a company that's got all that money that might be able to just spin something up and push it out, I suppose.
The other thought that I had about this was, AMP was tied to Amazon Music, and Amazon Music is really not a big player in the music market. Spotify and Apple really are. And so, in some ways I could see where Apple or Amazon just wasn't seeing the return on investment. They weren't getting the tracks played to be able to, to get all the financial things that they want to accomplish. Maybe it just didn't line up so that it was profitable and worth their while to keep the service going.
Yes. So, Suze, I think there is an element of, oh, look, this is a thing that we can jump on. But I also think that there's just very sensible reasons for each of these companies to do it in their own way. So you can see Amazon wanted something that could fit in with an install base of Alexa devices that could get people doing more with their Alexa devices than just setting a timer. So higher value use of Alexa, which was a long-standing business issue for them. But also the music side, you said, Michael, that Amazon itself is a fairly staid, boring company. And if you looked at AMP, the fact that they didn't include the Amazon brand and that the design of it, the marketing of it was so different, so bright and colorful and youth focused. Amazon had a need to appeal to younger customers for various of their businesses. So it also served that. So it makes a lot of sense that Amazon got involved. It wasn't just jumping on a bandwagon, but also it didn't achieve those specific things that they needed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still unsure that Amazon really understand any direction of what they've really headed for with Alexa at all whatsoever, having worked alongside kind of that voice industry for a few years. Like you've said, I was hoping that this might bring Alexa into it in some way. I want to bring Cindy Lou in. I think you actually did some creation over on AMP, Cindy Lou. Is that right?
I tried to. Well, I did put the list together, and I was all ready to start, and I went go live, and it said, wait for your first listener to arrive. That was it. Like, I could do nothing until my first listener arrived. And since I was able to do a space, whatever it is a show, because I have an American account, but I live in New Zealand, so my time zone is different than the people in America. So of course nobody was up. So I had no listeners. So there thus ended the show.
Oh, it stopped before it started. And yet you were all ready to go.
That's why I say I tried.
Had you kind of built up what music you were what was your hope for it? You'd built up a music playlist you were going to go through. Had you sort of planned around what you might say and the structure of it or anything like that? Or was it just going to be on the hoof, whoever joined, see what happened?
I was actually doing an experimental show. I was going to do experimental show of all of the different versions of Amazing Grace and just talk about the different artists afterwards and how it felt or what that person did.
Wow. I mean, I want to listen to that show, right? This is the thing. Where else do we go for that content? Where else can we hear that? What an amazing idea. And what a shame that you were thwarted before it even really got off the ground. So the idea was that once the show had some listeners to it, you'd have been able to press the button and play the songs. But until then, it wasn't allowing you to do that.
Yep. So that was my one and only experience. I didn't go back to try that again. I was like, okay, never mind.
Yeah, and I
So
think
they
that
may
they
have changed
fixed
it.
that.
Yeah,
I think
they
they
probably
did, but
did.
they lost people at that point. I mean, it was
Yeah.
too late.
Well, this is the thing. If you're trying something new, you don't want to go to all that hassle of like putting together a playlist, finding the moment to do it, hitting the button and then nothing. And, that does drive people away. And someone, Cindy Lou's experienced at social audio and will have known what she was going to do and everything else. But someone who might have thought, oh, this looks like a good thing. This is my first try out at this. I can use some music, who then doesn't get to even open their mouth on the mic and be heard by anybody at all, they're not going to try again, right?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, probably not.
And we're available in all of your favorite podcast apps. We're out there, All Things Audio. You can also go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com as well.
You certainly can. And you can catch us here on Twitter and use the hashtag AllThingsAudio, and we'll pick that up throughout the week. So that's it for this week. But thank you so much to everyone that's been here in the space with us and those of you listening. And we'll catch up with you next week.
Bye, everybody.